So here we have our 3 plasma guns set up. 2 of them have the plasma coils base coated in white, and 1 of them is base coated in black. The black one I'm going to use for the longer way of layering up the paint, the one that you get the most control over, and the other 2 I'm going to use for the slightly quicker ways of dry brushing and using inks. So the first thing I'm going to do with this one is give the plasma coils a dark base coat. So these ones are going to be done in Macragge blue for the base, and I'm going to work up through lighter blues. Once that first layer of blue is dry, I'm going to take a lighter shade. In this case we're going to use ice blue, and we're going to use a small dry brush, and we're going to dry brush onto the ridges. So we're going to try and catch all of the ridges and leave the dark blue in the shade. And when you're doing this with the plasma coils, you've got to decide which part is going to be the hottest. So some people paint plasma coils with the base being the hottest area, in which case that would be the lightest area, and your darker colours would be at the top. Some people paint them with the base being the cool area and the hottest area being the top in the middle, in which case this would be your brightest area. For this one, I'm going to use the top being the brightest, hottest area. So when you've got your paint ready on your dry brush, you just simply drag the paint along, trying to catch all of the ridges, trying not to let it get into the deepest recesses. Obviously those are the areas that you want to stay dark, if they're going to be the darkest areas in your plasma coil. So slowly and gradually build the colour up, going back and forwards over the model until the colour starts to lie, until you're happy with how bright it's becoming. Don't worry about getting it over on all the rest of the model. If you wanted to later on, you could tidy up and paint all around at the minute I've got it black, but that's just there to be high contrast so you guys can see what's going on. If I'd have painted the whole gun first, then I'd be making a mess of the paint job. Unless of course I wanted it to be that way. Some sort of overspill, some sort of light source, in which case that works fine. So build up the colour until you're happy with it. I'm going to leave that there. I'm going to come along with the next brightest colour in just a minute. So now the next brightest colour I'm going to use is going to be Blue Horror, which is an edge paint by Games Workshop. I'm going to use the same technique. I'm going to use a dry brush. I'm going to dry brush all over it. This time I'm going to concentrate it more in the centre and less towards the edges, so that as you're getting into the middle of the coil and the higher on the top of the coil, it looks like it's the warmest spot. And again, I'm just going to gently keep moving the brush over, picking up these areas, letting the paint, letting the dry brush do the work, gradually build up until I'm happy. Now, if you notice on the dry brush there, I've still got some of the last colour. I didn't wash the brush out before I switched colours. I've left it on there. So that it does 2 things. One, it keeps your brush dry. You don't want your dry brush to get wet. But 2, it kind of mixes the 2 colours on the brush. So as I'm laying down this layer, you've got the previous blue going down as well as the lighter blue going down. So Just build it up on the edges, concentrating most in the middle where I want it to be its brightest until I'm happy. And now I'm going to move on to the next colour. So this is where I'm going to try and make it pop. So the next colour I'm going to use is Paraxy White. So I'm jumping straight to white, and this is going to be on the very edge and the very middle, the very centre. So again, I'm just going to work this in, going against the detail. And I'm going to go with the detail. I don't want to paint a line into those recesses. I just want this colour to be picked up on the edges, on the raised coils, like that. Building up in the centre, trying not to let it get to the edges. I don't want it in the darker areas. Let me give the impression that this thing's glowing from the centre. There we go. So you've kind of got a central glow, fading out into a cooler blue. Now that looks quite grainy, and it looks a little dry and a little powdery. So we're going to knock that back in a second with some Drakenhof Nightshade. I'm going to paint this on, and that's hopefully going to get rid of all this blue chalky colour and darken down the recesses and bring it all together. So still using quite a fine brush, not a large wash brush, because I don't want to cover the entire area. Well, I do, but I want lots of control over it. So I'm going to use a thinner brush to start with, and I'm going to paint it where I want it to be. So all along this bottom ledge, which is the cool area, is where I want it. So this is undiluted. There's no water, there's no medium in this. I'm using it straight as it is, because I want it to be its darkest in the recesses. So I'm trying to bump up the contrast between the bright areas of the plasma coil and the darker areas of the plasma coil. And once I've got that outlined, I'm then going to take a watered down version, probably 50-50 water to Drakenhof Nightshade, and I'm then going to glaze that over the whole area. So I want it to go in the recesses now. I want it to stay in the white. I want it to just draw all the colours together and get rid of that chalky colour. I didn't want to kill the highlights. That's why I didn't use it straight out of the pot. So I've got two different levels of shade on there. So there we go. We'll give that a minute to dry. So the second way I'm going to be doing the plasma is using a white base coat, because I want it to be nice and bright. And this time I'm going to be using Tesseract Glow technical paint. So that's why we've got the white base, because this is going to show up nice and bright. And I'm going to be shading it down after I've got it all on there with a darker colour in the recesses. So once we're ready, you've got your white base coat, Tesseract Glow. I'm just going to paint it on. And this paint's really thin, it's really transparent. That's why we use the white base coat rather than the black base coat, because this would never show up on black. Now this is the quickest way of doing plasma. It's not as long, there's not as many stages as the previous one I just did in blue. With the dry brushing and the adding a few different layers of highlights and then shading. This is just simply Tesseract Glow, which is already a bright, quite fluorescent paint to start with. And then we're just going to give it some shading. So that's the basic. I'm going to leave that to dry. Might go along and tidy up any of the white that's on the areas that should be black. But we'll do that once it's painted. Yeah. We'll leave that to dry and then we'll come back and shade it in a minute. So now that green's dry, we're going to shade it down a bit. We're going to use Contrast Militarum Green and we're going to mix that 50-50 with the Contrast Medium. So now I'm going to take a fine brush and I'm going to start to paint the Contrast Medium into the recesses. So again, just like the last time, I'm not going to slosh it all over because I don't want it to cover the entire part of the model. I don't want to get rid of the glowing effect of the technical paint. I just want to put shade into the bottom areas of it. So I'm going to paint the edges. And I'm going to use the paint when it's in the recesses damp. I'm just going to draw it out. Now we have really simple contrast and technical paint, just about a bit of a glow and a bit of a shade. And the third and final quick way of doing plasma glow, or plasma coil glow, is to paint it all silver, get it as bright as you can, and then I'm going to go over it with the Soulstone Blue technical paint. So these are, some other companies call them the gel paints. They basically give you like a glassy effect. And these paints are quite thick. And they're used for painting gems, windows, anything you want that's going to be a glassy reflective surface. But if you wanted to, I guess you could use them for plasma coils, because who's to say what plasma coils really look like? So I'm going to get on there. It's quite thick, or it looks quite thick, but it actually goes on really thin. And you can see that it sort of stains the area. So I haven't watered this down at all. And I'm just putting it on. So look how thick that looks on the brush there. But actually when you put it on, it goes on really quite thin. And it's kind of got this glassy appearance, or this glassy feel to it. As you can see, it doesn't cover up the silver. You can still see the silver coming through. But it does give you sort of blue, sort of energy look to it. Now you can get this paint in to do a red, do a green, and I got a blue. So you can paint your plasma coils any colour you like. Green, blue, red, orange. Personally I think they look good in any colour. And no one can tell you that you're right or wrong. Because who actually knows what a plasma coil looks like? So just keep layering this on because it's really thin, and I just want to make sure that it's got an even coverage, and then I'll let it dry, see how it looks. See how it's got a lot of surface tension, so it's not watery like an ink, it's not thick like a normal paint, it's quite a gloopy, gel-like paint. But I think I've got an even enough coverage there, so I'm going to let it dry and we'll see where we're at in 10 minutes or so. So there it is, guys. 3 simple ways of painting plasma glow. We've got the traditional layering the paints up using dry brushing and ink washing on the top. We've got the technical paint the soulstone blue over a silver base in the middle, and we've got the technical tesseract glow with an ink wash over a white base coat in the bottom. So thank you for watching the video. I hope you've enjoyed it. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys on the next video.